Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another Top 10 video. And today's Top 10 is the films of Brian DePalma. Now, this might be my last Top 10, because as I was thinking about Vincent Price, as you do now and again, I was thinking there's no way I could do a Top 10 Vincent Price. And then I was thinking about Christopher Walken, as you often do. There's no way I could do top 10 Christopher Walken films. So I'm probably just going to do the films of actors and directors in my collection and just go through all of them and then maybe just talk about which ones are my favourites. But for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to do top 10 Brian DePalma films. Again, these are subject to change, apart from probably the first one. DePalma, I think, is still underrated as perhaps a genre filmmaker. He's always tagged as just ripping off Hitchcock, even though, as far as my director rankings are concerned, he's better than Hitchcock. He started doing kind of experimental films and comedies with an early Robert De Niro in the late 60s, early 70s, and then he kind of developed into doing thrillers and gangster films, even though his thrillers are probably what he's more famous for. I haven't really seen much of his later output. I think Femme Fatale in 2002, could be wrong with the date. I think that's probably the last one that I've actually seen, so I can't really comment on his later work. But anyway, let's make a start with number 10. And number 10 is one of the best Stephen King. Sorry, I apologise for that horrible subliminal thought there. One of the best Stephen King adaptations from 1976 is Carrie, with a career-defining turn by Sissy Spacek. It's an early appearance by John Travolta and Nancy Allen, who would later appear in another De Palma film. But the star of the show is really Piper Laurie as Carrie White's domineering religious mother, who just steals every scene. It's about a young girl, as you all know, who develops strange powers, and as she is becoming a woman, there's the famous uncomfortable scene in the shower at school, and a wonderful pyrotechnic climax. And speaking of climaxes, how Piper Laurie's character is killed is just wonderful. She is against Carrie having boyfriends, and the idea of Carrie having sex is disgusting. But she is essentially penetrated to death by certain objects, and she seems to enjoy it. It's a wonderful set piece. Again, one of De Palma's trademarks are set pieces. He is one of the best technicians in cinema, He knows how to use the camera, he knows how to move the camera, he knows how to elicit emotional responses with camera movement. And unlike a lot of his peers like Scorsese and Spielberg and Lucas, who seem to have forgotten how to use the camera, have forgotten how to move the camera, that's one of De Palma's strengths. Obviously, Carrie is famous for its ending. There's wonderful making of documentaries on that Arrow Blu-ray release about how the ending was going to be, and how they changed it. It's a lot of fun, and it's kind of a must-see for Piper Laurie's performance. Next on the list is High Grade Cheese. It's Carlito's Way with Al Pacino and Sean Penn. This is perhaps a companion piece to Scarface. If Scarface had survived and went to prison instead of exploding in a coke bomb. Again, it's not De Palma's best film, but there's just a lot of fun to be had. It has a sense of period. Pacino gets to chew scenery in wonderful Pacino style. It does start at the end and then go back, which I'm not the biggest fan of that device. Sean Penn wears a bald cap with strange ginger hair and gives a nice turn as a sleazy lawyer. It's about Carlito Brigante, who's just out of Lewisburg, trying to make a change in his life. But just like The Godfather 3, no matter how far he tries to get out, they've always pull him back in. So he thinks he's going straight, but he gets embroiled in situations and he ends up with a bizarre boat rescue from Rikers Island, which obviously ends badly, and there's consequences and repercussions. It's quite a hysterical film. It's handled very, very melodramatically. All the performances are kind of up to 11. Again, there's great set pieces, and it's just wonderfully silly and enjoyable. Next on the list is Sisters from 1973. This is arguably his first kind of De Palma film. It stars Margot Kidder as two sisters, and a reporter sees one of the sisters killing somebody. She phones the police, but there's no body, there's no hints of a murder. Again, it's one of De Palma's obsessions about what we see isn't necessarily what actually happens. There is a kind of voyeuristic streak that goes through De Palma's work. The TV show that Margaret Kidder's character meets her boyfriend is called Peeping Toms, which is probably a nod to Michael Powell's masterpiece. One of Michael Powell's masterpieces, Peeping Tom, strangely enough. So there's always De Palma using the camera and then using the camera as our eye, but not actually showing us the truth, how the camera lies, and obviously things are not what they seem, which is something that I'll probably say quite a lot of during this top 10 list, because that's pretty much the take-home message with De Palma films. Everything that he shows us isn't necessarily true. So he does kind of have a very good point about the whole filmmaking process, the whole storytelling process throughout a lot of his work. So next on the list is Scarface, which had to be here somewhere. I'm not the hugest fan of Scarface. Again, it's just a wonderful operatic. It's kind of the opposite of the kind of stately, almost polite Godfather films. This is coked up. It's the 80s. It's Giorgio Moroder score. It's The World Is Yours, Excess. It almost works as, I've mentioned before, films that are quintessential 70s films. Well, Scarface could be a quintessential 80s film about the decade of excess. Al Pacino chewing scenery in an Al Pacino way, as he works his way up the crime ladder. Michelle Pfeiffer in an early role, spends most of the time coked up. Quite a lot of people spend most of the time coked up. It's more one of those films that you just kind of have a distance to, and you just stand back and watch the carnage. You could argue that nobody's particularly likeable in Scarface. It is just one of those films that that I think there is a distance between the audience and the actual characters, because you don't really identify with anybody. You're not really particularly rooting for anybody. You are just pretty much sitting back and watching the devastation that's caused. It's an iconic film with iconic performance by Pacino. It's got fantastic one-liners that are just, etched in the history of cinema. But it's not necessarily a film that I go back and watch that often. Apart from anything else, you've kind of seen it so many times, it's kind of in your head anyway. Next on the list is Dressed to Kill. Another classic De Palma. While he's distracting you with his right hand, there's something going on in his left hand. There's murders. Angie Dickinson stars, but how long does she last? Michael Caine is a psychiatrist who's trying to explain to the cops what the killer might be, what the killer's thinking, who they should be looking for. Again, wonderful set pieces, just hugely enjoyable, and another Things Might Not Be As They Seem film from De Palma. Next on the list, strangely enough, is another film about things might not actually be what you seem. It's Body Double, which is available on Indicator. This stars Craig Wasson as an out-of-work actor who meets this other actor and agrees to look after his house while he's out of town. And of course, this being a De Palma film, there's a telescope that just happens to be looking into an attractive woman's apartment, and he witnesses a murder, and he is chased by the killer. An early performance by Melanie Griffith, but again, things aren't necessarily what they appear to be. It's got a wonderful 80s sheen to it. It's very bright and colourful. Again, it's got great set pieces, great chase scenes in it. And again, it's hugely enjoyable. Again, I wouldn't say DePalma is a director that will give you the answers to the universe. What he will give you is well crafted, really well shot films about voyeurism, identity, sexuality, and just really entertaining genre films. Next on the list, speaking of which, it's Raising Cain, which features a wonderful performance by John Lithgow, or 4 performances by John Lithgow. It's about multiple personalities. It's completely barking. John Lithgow, who has appeared in quite a lot of De Palma films dating back to Obsession, plays somebody who's a little bit unhinged. There's murders, there's a wonderful set piece. It is probably De Palma's wackiest, craziest film, but it's just so well done. It will put a smile on your face. John Lithgow should have got the Oscar, or 4 Oscars. He's just so much fun in it. And I mean, I think the first time I saw it in the 90s, I wasn't that impressed, but seeing it again, and the more you watch it, it's just, there's so much pleasure to be had from it. Raising Cain. Next on the list is Blowout, with the aforementioned John Travolta and Nancy Allen. John Travolta when he was good. This was made in 1981, I believe. Obviously kind of influenced by Antonioni's Blow Up, with a little bit of The Conversation, Coppola's underrated masterwork. This stars John Travolta as a sound recordist for cheap horror films, who happens to be out getting natural sounds, and a car careens off a bridge into a creek, and he pulls out the girl in the car, but the man in the car dies, and it turns out he is a senator, or a senator candidate. Can't actually remember. And John Travolta, going back and hearing the tape, hears a sound, and he figures out that it might not necessarily be the accident that it looks like. It's a great little conspiracy thriller. Again, set piece heaven. A wonderful feel of time and place. John Lithgow's in it again. It's just a great wee film. De Palma doesn't rush it. He takes his time with it. It's just a really well done film. I kind of prefer it to Blow Up. I'd much rather a blowout than a blow up. John Travolta is really engaging and remarkably fresh-faced and really good. And Nancy Allen gives a nice turn as well. It's just a really enjoyable little film. And on to number 2, which is probably his most mainstream film. One of the films he's most notable for. It's The Untouchables. And this is probably the least kind of De Palma film. It's just a straight up Hollywood blockbuster, but it's just so good when Hollywood blockbusters were actually intelligent and well made and well crafted. I mean, directed by De Palma, written by David Mamet, scored by Ennio Morricone, suits by Giorgio Armani. The film just looks absolutely beautiful. Again, the period is captured magnificently. Sean Connery got an Oscar for his moving portrayal of an Irish cop with a Scottish accent. Kevin Costner, who it's hard to believe wasn't actually a star at the time, but I think this pretty much made him a star. Robert De Niro is fantastic as Al Capone, even though he's not on screen for that long. Great support by Andy Garcia. It just has wonderful moments, endless Mamet quotes. So yes, it might not be, a De Palma film really, as far as his usual obsessions and themes. It's just so well done, so well crafted, and just really enjoyable. I would rather watch The Untouchables than Scarface, speaking personally. It's a Hollywood blockbuster. Yes, it's mainstream. Yes, it's not necessarily a signature De Palma film, but it proves that De Palma could make that kind of film, and he makes it beautifully. And it's quite magnificent, and it's hard to believe it's now 33 years old. And number one in the list is a film that I saw decades ago and only revisited in the last couple of years, but I absolutely love it, and that is Phantom of the Paradise. His musical from the 70s, I even have it in 2 editions, so I must really like it. The music is by Paul Williams, who did the score for Bugsy Malone. I have the soundtrack, which is absolutely fantastic. It's a cross between Phantom of the Opera, the Faust legend, and the Picture of Dorian Gray, all mixed in with a rock and roll soundtrack that almost gives you the history of rock music. It goes from rock and roll, and then it goes to beach rock, and then it goes to a smorgasbord of styles. It goes kind of almost proto-metal, and then the final song over the end credits is arguably the greatest final song over end credits, as we see the characters in their final moments. It's just a beautiful song. The story itself is about a young idealistic composer, played by William Finlay, who appeared in quite a lot of De Palma's earlier films, including Sisters. And Paul Williams himself plays this Svengali type music producer called Swan, and he essentially rips the young composer off. The young composer ends up going to prison. There's a really kind of creepy, disturbing scene that reminds one of concentration camps, where they're doing a thing where they're knocking out all the prisoners' teeth. It's really quite disturbing. But he escapes, becomes the Phantom, and he comes to the Paradise, which is Swan's big nightclub, and starts causing havoc. But then Swan finds him and says, he'll do his magnus opus. But again, tricks him, steals the music, and then he puts on the show himself. But obviously, there's consequences to be paid. It's just so fantastic. I did my top 10 musicals a while ago, and for years Rocky Horror Picture Show was number 1, but I think Phantom of the Paradise actually overtook it. It's that good. It's hard to describe if you haven't seen it, apart from it's amazing. Again, it has kind of different musical styles. It has wonderful set pieces. DePalma, just to wind people up, almost does a psycho shower scene just to completely annoy people. It's got great performances. It's just absolutely fantastic. As expected, I think it bombed when it was released because nobody really knew how to take it. I'm sure I saw it years ago in Moviedrome, but kind of never went back to it. It was actually Nazarene Productions who did a video on it, and that kind of re-piqued my interest. And then once I got it and watched it again, it's just absolutely fantastic. So I would say that's my favourite Brian DePalma film. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below your favourite Brian DePalma films. And hopefully we'll see you again for possibly not top 10 videos, but just here's the films in my collection by this actor or director, and I'll just mention my favourites as I go through them, which isn't that catchy a title for a video series, but I'll have a little think about that. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you all have a good new year that extends for the whole 12 months rather than just the first day of the year, which I always find a bit strange. And hopefully we'll see you again. This is Solitude Ronan saying farewell.